When Frank opened his granddaughter's wedding invitation, he smiled until he saw the handwritten note inside. "Please don't wear that old suit. It makes us look poor." That suit wasn't just clothing. It was the one he wore to marry his late wife, to baptize his granddaughter, to every milestone that mattered. For 43 years, it held the history of his family. But now, it wasn't good enough. Faced with a choice, hide who he was behind an expensive new suit or show up as himself, Frank made a decision that would leave an empty chair at the ceremony and a memory his granddaughter would never forget. I held the wedding invitation in my hands and felt my heart skip. Emily's handwriting on the envelope, careful and elegant, just like Dorothy taught her when she was 7. For a moment, I was back in our kitchen in Cleveland, watching my granddaughter practice her cursive at our old oak table. The invitation itself was beautiful. Thick paper, gold lettering, the kind that costs more than my monthly electric bill. Emily Catherine Morrison and James Alexander Whitmore, the third request, the honor of your presence. I smiled. My little Emily, getting married. Then I unfolded the small note tucked inside, her handwriting again, but hurried this time. Personal. "Grandpa Frank, I'm so excited you'll be there, but please, please don't wear that old suit. I know it means a lot to you, but James's family is very particular. His mother already asked about our background. Could you maybe get something new or borrow from Uncle Mike? It would mean everything to me. Love, M." I read it twice, then a third time. That old suit. I set the invitation down on my kitchen counter next to the coffee mug Dorothy painted 43 years ago. The one with the faded roses that Emily used to drink hot chocolate from when she visited, back when she visited. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet. There it hung, on the same wooden hanger I'd used since 1978. Navy blue, single-breasted, from J.C. Penney. $89, which was a week's groceries back then. I'd saved for 3 months to buy it. I wore it to marry Dorothy at Holy Cross Church. I wore it to my promotion ceremony at Ford. I wore it to Jessica's high school graduation, to Emily's baptism, to Dorothy's funeral. It was the only suit I owned, the only one I needed. I touched the fabric. Still good, a little worn at the cuffs maybe, but Dorothy had taught me how to take care of things. "Frank," she used to say, "if you respect what you have, it'll respect you back." I thought about Emily's note, about James's mother and her questions about our background. I knew what that meant. I'd heard it before when Jessica moved to New York and started using her middle name professionally, when she stopped bringing boyfriends home to Cleveland, when Thanksgiving invitations became phone calls, then texts, then nothing at all. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the invitation again. St. Patrick's Cathedral, Manhattan, a world away from Holy Cross Church, where Dorothy and I promised to love each other for better or worse, richer or poorer. My phone rang. "Jessica." "Dad, did you get Emily's invitation?" "I did." "Great. So you'll be there?" I waited. Sometimes the things people don't say tell you more than the things they do. "Dad, you there?" "I'm here." "Good. Listen, about what to wear." She paused. I could hear traffic in the background, probably walking to one of those fancy coffee shops where they charge $5 for what I make at home for 50 cents. "Emily mentioned she wrote you a note." "She did." She's just nervous, Dad. James's family, they have certain expectations. Certain expectations. Like their granddaughter's grandfather shouldn't look like he worked with his hands for 35 years. Shouldn't remind them that their new in-law came from people who punched time clocks and saved for months to buy a suit. I understand, I said. So you'll get something new? There's a men's warehouse near you, or I'll handle it. Okay, good. Emily will be so relieved. After she hung up, I sat in the quiet of my house, Dorothy's house, our house. The walls still held her voice, her laugh, the way she'd hum while folding laundry. She'd been gone 15 years, but I still made coffee for 2 every morning. Force of habit. I picked up the invitation one more time. Emily Catherine Morrison. She'd dropped the Kowalski, just like her mother had become Jessica Morrison for business. Our family name, the one Dorothy carried with such pride, had become something to edit out. I walked back to the closet and looked at the suit. In the dim light, I could almost see myself in 1978, 27 years old, nervous as hell, straightening my tie in the mirror while Dorothy got ready in her parents' house across town. "You look perfect," she'd told me at the altar. My perfect Frank. I closed the closet door and walked to the kitchen. The invitation sat on the counter, waiting for my answer. RSVP by March 15th, it said. The wedding was in 6 weeks. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a pen. The same drawer where I kept Dorothy's things, her reading glasses, the last letter she wrote me before the cancer took her voice, a pressed rose from our wedding bouquet. I had a choice to make. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt something I hadn't felt since Dorothy died. I felt angry. I folded the invitation in half and placed it in the desk drawer right next to Dorothy's things. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called in sick to my volunteer shift at the community center. I needed to think. The next morning, I drove to Ford's old plant. They'd torn it down 5 years ago, put up a shopping plaza where Building C used to be, but I could still see it. The parking lot full of lunch pails and work boots, the shift whistle at 6 a.m. sharp, the pride we felt making something real with our hands. I sat in my truck and remembered the day I got promoted to line supervisor. Dorothy had insisted I buy a suit for the ceremony. "You earned this, Frank," she'd said, adjusting my tie in our bedroom mirror. "Don't you dare show up in work clothes." $89. We ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner that week to afford it. But I wore that suit when the plant manager shook my hand in front of 300 workers. I wore it when they gave me my 30-year pin. I wore it to retirement parties for men who'd worked beside me since we were young, men who'd have been proud to sit next to me at their grandson's wedding, old suit and all. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Grandpa, so excited for the wedding. Did you find something new to wear? Mom said you were going shopping. Love you." I stared at the message for a long time. When had I become someone Emily felt she needed to fix? When had the man who taught her to ride a bike, who read her bedtime stories, who held her when she cried over her first broken heart, when had that man become an embarrassment? I drove to Men's Warehouse anyway, just to see. The salesman was polite enough. Young kid, probably Emily's age, with a firm handshake and a practiced smile. He showed me suits that cost more than my monthly pension check. Navy, charcoal, black. All fine suits, he assured me, perfect for a wedding. "What's the occasion?" he asked, measuring my shoulders. "My granddaughter's getting married." "How wonderful! She must be so excited to have you there." I almost told him about the note, about the particular family, about how my presence needed to be managed, contained, made acceptable. Instead, I said, "She is. The suit looked good on me. I'll admit that. The fabric felt expensive, foreign. Nothing like the cotton blend I was used to. The price tag made my chest tight. $400 on sale, more money than Dorothy and I spent on clothes in a year." "It's perfect on you," the kid said. "Classic, elegant. Your granddaughter will be so proud." Proud. As if my old suit had been something shameful. I stood in the dressing room, looking at myself in the three-way mirror. The man staring back looked like someone else. Someone who belonged at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Someone whose granddaughter wouldn't have to apologize for him. Someone who wasn't Frank Kowalski from Cleveland. I took the suit off and hung it back on the hanger. "I need to think about it," I told the salesman. "Of course. But don't wait too long. We're having a sale this month only." I drove home and sat in Dorothy's chair, the blue recliner we'd bought secondhand when Jessica was born. Dorothy used to fall asleep in it reading, her glasses sliding down her nose, a romance novel open on her chest. I pulled out the invitation again. 6 weeks until Emily walked down the aisle. 6 weeks to decide who I wanted to be at her wedding. The man in the expensive suit, acceptable and forgettable. Or Frank Kowalski, in the suit he'd worn to marry the love of his life. I picked up the phone to call Emily back. Then I set it down. Some decisions, Dorothy used to say, you have to live with forever. This felt like one of them. I spent the weekend in my workshop, the one Dorothy always called my thinking space. She was right. Surrounded by the tools I'd collected over 40 years, some inherited from my father, others earned through decades of careful saving, I could hear myself think. Monday morning, I made my decision. I drove to the bank, the same First National where Dorothy and I had opened our first account in 1975. Mary behind the counter had known us both for 30 years. "Frank, how are you holding up?" "I'm well, Mary. I need to make a withdrawal." She pulled up my account. I watched her expression change slightly when I told her the amount. $400. More than I'd ever taken out at once since Dorothy's medical bills. "Everything okay?" "My granddaughter's getting married." Mary smiled. "How wonderful. Emily, right? She was such a sweet little thing." Was. Past tense. Even Mary had noticed. I drove back to Men's Warehouse with the cash in my wallet. The same young salesman greeted me, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Back for that suit?" "I am." He had me try it on again. Same perfect fit, same foreign fabric, same man in the mirror who looked like he belonged in St. Patrick's Cathedral. I paid in cash, $20 bills worn soft from years in working men's pockets. "Your granddaughter is going to love it," he said, hanging the suit in a plastic bag. I drove home and hung the new suit in my closet, right next to the old one. They looked strange together. The expensive charcoal gray next to the faded navy blue, like they belonged to different men living different lives. That evening, Emily called. "Grandpa, Mom said you got a new suit." "I did." "I'm so happy. I know it's silly, but James's mother, she can be a little judgmental. This will make everything so much easier." "Easier." For who? Tell me about him, I said. James. Oh, Grandpa, he's wonderful. Harvard Law, just like his father. They have this beautiful house in the Hamptons. His mother sits on museum boards, charity committees. Very sophisticated. Sophisticated. Another word for not like us. Does he make you happy? A pause. Of course he does. Why would you ask that? Just want to make sure. He does, Grandpa. Really. You'll see when you meet him. He's perfect. Perfect. Like the suit hanging in my closet. Like the man I was supposed to become for one day. After we hung up, I sat in Dorothy's chair and looked at both suits hanging in the bedroom doorway. The old one held 43 years of memories. The new one held promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I thought about Dorothy, how she'd feel seeing me in clothes bought to hide who we were. She'd worn her grandmother's dress to our wedding, mended 3 times, too short for fashion, but beautiful, because it carried love forward through generations. Frank, I could almost hear her say, you are not the problem here. But I'd bought the suit anyway, spent our grocery money, our electric bill money, our small pleasures money, to become someone acceptable to people who'd never known Dorothy's laugh or seen her garden or understood why a man might keep the same suit for 43 years. I pulled out the invitation one more time. 6 weeks had become 4. The RSVP deadline was tomorrow. I had the suit. I had the lie. I had everything Emily thought she needed. Everything except the courage to wear it. I woke up the morning of the RSVP deadline with Dorothy's voice in my head. Not a memory this time. Something new. Something I'd never heard her say but knew she would have. Frank Kowalski, what are you so afraid of? I sat on the edge of our bed and looked at both suits hanging in the closet. The question hung in the air like morning fog, refusing to lift. What was I afraid of? That James's mother would look down on me? That Emily would be embarrassed? That I'd somehow taint their perfect day with my blue-collar presence? Or was I afraid of something else entirely? I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the invitation. The RSVP card was simple. Will attend or will not attend. Check one box, sign your name, drop it in the mail. 20 seconds to decide how the rest of my life would look. I thought about Emily at 7 years old, standing on a chair in this same kitchen, helping Dorothy make Christmas cookies. Flour in her hair, chocolate on her cheek, pure joy in her eyes when she'd successfully cut out a star shape. Grandpa, look! It's perfect! Dorothy had winked at me over Emily's head. Perfect is overrated, sweetheart. Made with love is better. When had Emily forgotten that? When had made with love become something to apologize for? I picked up my phone and scrolled through our text messages. The last real conversation we'd had was 8 months ago, when she called crying about a fight with James. I'd listened for an hour, offered what comfort I could. She'd thanked me, said she loved me, promised to visit soon. She never did, but she'd found time to write that note about my suit. I drove to the post office anyway, stood in line with the RSVP card in my hand, still unsigned. The woman in front of me was mailing something to her son in California. She mentioned he was having his first baby, how excited she was to be a grandmother. Does he live far? I asked. 3,000 miles, but I'm flying out next month to help. First grandchild, you know. Nothing could keep me away. Nothing could keep me away. I used to feel that way about Emily's big moments. Her graduation, her college acceptance, her first job. I'd driven through snowstorms, taken time off work, spent money we didn't have because nothing could keep me away. Now I was standing in a post office, holding an RSVP card, wondering if I should keep myself away. I got back in line at the counter, the card still blank. "Mailing something?" the clerk asked, trying to decide. He smiled. "Those are the hardest kind." I drove home without mailing anything. That afternoon, my neighbor Bob came over with a beer. We'd been friends since 1982, both Ford men, both widowers now. He knew about the wedding, about the suit situation. Bob was never one to sugarcoat things. "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know." "Let me ask you something, Frank. If Dorothy was here, what would she tell you?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "She'd tell me to go. She'd say Emily needs her grandfather there, even if Emily doesn't know it yet." "And what about the suit?" I looked toward the bedroom where both suits hung waiting for my decision. "She'd tell me to wear the one that tells the truth." Bob nodded. "Dorothy was a smart woman, the smartest." "So what's the problem?" The problem was that I'd spent $400 trying to become someone else. The problem was that my granddaughter thought love came with conditions, that acceptance had a dress code, that family was something you had to earn by hiding who you were. The problem was that I'd started to believe her. Bob finished his beer and stood to leave. "You know what I think, Frank." "What's that?" "I think you're not really deciding what to wear. You're deciding who you want to be." After he left, I sat in Dorothy's chair and called Emily. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Emily. I'm probably planning my wedding or at yoga, so leave a message and I'll get back to you." Planning her wedding. The wedding I might or might not attend, depending on whether I could figure out how to fit into her new life. I hung up without leaving a message. Then I did something I hadn't done since Dorothy's funeral. I got down on my knees beside our bed and prayed. Not to God exactly, but to her. To the woman who'd loved me in that suit for 43 years, who'd never once suggested I needed to be anyone other than exactly who I was. "Help me, Dorothy. I don't know how to be a grandfather to someone who's ashamed of their grandfather." The house was quiet, but I swear I felt her answer in the stillness. Sometimes love means showing up exactly as you are, even when, especially when, that's not what people think they want. I stood up, walked to the closet, and looked at both suits one more time. Then I made my choice. The morning of Emily's wedding arrived gray and cold, typical March weather in New York. I'd driven down the night before, staying at a Motel 6 near the highway, rather than accepting Jessica's offer to put me up at her apartment. I needed space to think, to prepare for what I knew would be the hardest day I'd faced since Dorothy's funeral. I stood in the motel bathroom at 6 a.m., looking at myself in the fluorescent-lit mirror. 2 suits hung on the bathroom door. The expensive charcoal gray that cost me $400 and a month of sleepless nights, and the navy blue that had hung in my closet for 43 years, waiting patiently for me to remember who I was. My hand shook slightly as I reached for the navy blue. The fabric felt familiar, worn soft by decades of careful wear. I slipped into the pants first. Still fit, though a little snug around the middle. Dorothy used to tease me about my love for her Sunday dinners, catching up with me eventually. The jacket came next. I slid my arms through the sleeves and felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt like myself. I stood in front of the mirror and straightened my tie. The same thin black tie I'd worn to marry Dorothy, knotted the way she'd taught me. She'd been the one with the steady hands back then, fixing my collar, smoothing my lapels, telling me I looked handsome enough to marry. "You sure about this, Frank?" I asked my reflection. The man in the mirror looked back at me with Dorothy's eyes, kind but unwavering. This was who I'd been for 72 years. This was who Dorothy had loved. This was who had raised Jessica and been there for Emily when she needed a grandfather's steadiness. If that wasn't good enough for St. Patrick's Cathedral, then maybe the problem wasn't with me. I folded the expensive suit carefully and laid it on the motel bed. $400 of compromise, of trying to be someone I wasn't. I'd return it after the wedding if they'd let me. Tell them it didn't fit right, which would be the truth in every way that mattered. The drive into Manhattan took an hour through traffic I wasn't used to. Dorothy and I had visited the city exactly twice in our marriage. Once for our 20th anniversary. Once when Jessica graduated from NYU. Both times, we'd felt like tourists in our own country, overwhelmed by the noise and crowds and endless rush of people who seemed to know exactly where they were going. I parked 6 blocks from St. Patrick's Cathedral and walked slowly through the streets, my old suit drawing no attention at all from the sea of New Yorkers hurrying past. I wasn't invisible exactly, but I wasn't remarkable either. Just another older man in a well-worn suit, probably heading to work or an appointment or any one of 1,000 ordinary destinations. It felt oddly comforting. St. Patrick's Cathedral rose in front of me like something from another world. Gothic spires reaching toward heaven, stone carved by hands that understood the weight of permanence. Dorothy would have loved it, I thought. She'd always been drawn to beautiful things, finding God in architecture and art and the way light fell through stained glass windows. I checked my watch. 10:30. The wedding was at 11, and I could see guests beginning to arrive. The women wore dresses that probably cost more than my monthly pension, paired with shoes that looked like they'd never touched pavement. The men wore suits that made mine look exactly like what it was. A working man's Sunday best, bought off the rack at J.C. Penney 43 years ago. I stood across the street and watched for 20 minutes, looking for familiar faces. There was Jessica, elegant in navy blue, greeting guests with the practiced smile she'd perfected in her corporate years. She looked beautiful, successful, every inch the Manhattan professional she'd worked so hard to become. I didn't see Emily yet, probably still getting ready, having her hair done and her makeup applied by professionals who understood that perfection was worth paying for. At 10:50, I crossed the street. The usher at the door was young, probably Emily's age, with the confident bearing of someone raised to work events like this. He looked at me with polite assessment, not unkind, but clearly calculating where I fit in the hierarchy of this carefully orchestrated day. "Good morning. Are you family or friend of the bride or groom?" "Family. I'm the bride's grandfather." He consulted his list, running a manicured finger down the names. I watched his face as he found Frank Kowalski and tried to reconcile it with the man standing in front of him. "Of course. You're seated in the second row, sir, right behind the immediate family." Second row. Behind Jessica and her husband. Behind Emily's college friends who'd been elevated to honorary family status. I'd been moved back, I realized. Not excluded entirely, that would have been too obvious, but relocated to where I'd be visible enough to satisfy appearances, but not prominent enough to draw attention. I followed the usher down the aisle, conscious of the whispered conversations that paused as I passed. I could feel eyes on me, taking inventory. The worn spots on my jacket sleeves, the shoes I'd polished that morning but couldn't quite bring back to their original shine, the tie that had been fashionable once but now marked me as someone from a different era entirely. I took my assigned seat and looked around at the assembled guests. This was Emily's world now. Successful, sophisticated, carefully curated. Everyone looked like they belonged in a magazine spread about perfect weddings. Everyone except me. The ceremony began with music that soared through the cathedral's vaulted ceiling. A processional of bridesmaids in champagne-colored silk, moving with the grace of women who'd been taught to walk properly, to smile properly, to present themselves as befitted their station in life. Then Emily appeared at the back of the cathedral, and my breath caught. She looked exactly like Dorothy had 43 years ago. Not physically. Emily had inherited Jessica's dark hair and delicate features, but in the way she moved, the quiet joy that seemed to emanate from her very being. This was a bride in love, ready to promise her life to someone she believed would cherish it. She was beautiful, absolutely, undeniably beautiful. And as she walked down the aisle toward the altar, her eyes swept the congregation, acknowledging guests with small nods and smiles. When her gaze reached my section, I saw her eyes find me. For just a moment, her step faltered, her smile flickered. She'd seen the suit, the old navy blue that I'd worn to marry her grandmother, that I'd worn to her baptism, that carried 43 years of our family's history in its worn fibers. Her eyes moved quickly away, back to James waiting at the altar, back to the role she was playing in this carefully choreographed performance. But I'd seen what I'd seen, the moment of recognition, of realization, of something that looked uncomfortably like disappointment. The ceremony continued around me, words about love and commitment and promises made before God and witnesses. I heard it all from my second-row seat, surrounded by people who'd known Emily for months or years, while I'd known her since she was born. When the priest asked if anyone objected to this union, the cathedral fell silent. I thought about Dorothy, about what she would say if she could see this moment, about Emily walking toward a future with someone whose family found me objectionable, whose world would always have conditions for acceptance. But I said nothing, because despite everything, despite the note and the seating arrangement and the look in Emily's eyes when she saw my suit, this was her choice, her day, her chance at happiness, even if that happiness required forgetting where she came from. The ceremony ended with rice and photographs and congratulations from people who'd never heard my name before today and would forget it by tomorrow. I stood at the edge of it all, watching my granddaughter begin her new life as Mrs. James Alexander Whitmore III. She looked happy. That had to be enough. Jessica approached me as the crowd began to move toward the reception venue. "Dad." She kissed my cheek dutifully. "I'm glad you made it. Wouldn't have missed it." She looked at my suit, and I saw her jaw tighten slightly. "I thought you were getting something new." "I did. This felt more appropriate." "Dad." She looks beautiful, Jessica. You should be proud. I am proud. But James's mother has been asking about you, and What has she been asking? Jessica glanced around, making sure we weren't being overheard. Just about your background, what you did for work, where you live now. I told her you were in manufacturing. Manufacturing? Not worked at Ford for 35 years? Not line supervisor? Not raised 3 kids after his wife died? Manufacturing? As if my life could be reduced to a single sanitized word that wouldn't embarrass anyone. I see. Don't be like that, Dad. It's just easier this way. Easier. The word Emily had used on the phone. Everything was easier when I was smaller, quieter, less myself. I should go, I said. Let you get to your reception. You're coming, aren't you? Emily's expecting you. I looked across the plaza at the guests climbing into hired cars and limousines, heading to a reception at a private club I'd never heard of, where the wine would cost more per bottle than I spent on groceries in a week. I don't think so. Dad, you have to come. Emily will be devastated if you don't. Devastated. Like she'd been devastated by the thought of me wearing my old suit. Like she'd be devastated if James's mother learned too much about where she really came from. Tell her I had to get back to Cleveland. Tell her I love her and I hope she's happy. Jessica's face softened. Don't do this. Don't punish her because you're hurt. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just going home. I started to walk away, but Jessica caught my arm. She's still your granddaughter, Dad. She still loves you. I looked back at the cathedral, where Emily was posing for photographs with her new husband and his family, a perfect tableau of success and sophistication, marred only by the absence of the man in the old suit who'd helped raise her. I know she does, I said, in her way. I walked the 6 blocks back to my car through streets full of people rushing toward their own important destinations. By the time I reached the motel, the wedding reception would be starting. Emily would be dancing with her new husband, surrounded by people who belonged in her new world, and I would be driving back to Cleveland, back to my quiet house and Dorothy's chair and the life I'd built with my own hands, back to where I belonged. I drove through the night back to Cleveland, stopping only for gas and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on the burner since morning. The highway stretched empty ahead of me, dotted with truckers and other travelers who had somewhere else to be. The radio played soft country music that reminded me of Dorothy, songs about love and loss and the way life sometimes takes unexpected turns. By the time I pulled into my driveway, dawn was breaking over Lake Erie. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, small, neat, unremarkable. Dorothy's roses were beginning to bud in the front garden, getting ready for another spring without her. I sat in the truck for a few minutes, too tired to move, too wired to sleep. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. The coffee cup I'd washed before leaving sat in the dish rack. The newspaper from Friday was still folded on the kitchen table. The silence felt different somehow, not peaceful like it usually was, but hollow. I hung my suit carefully in the closet, right back where it belonged. The expensive charcoal gray still lay on my bed where I'd left it, tags attached, receipt in the pocket. $400 of trying to be someone else, someone acceptable to people who would never know what Dorothy's laugh sounded like or understand why a man might keep the same suit for 43 years. I called the store later that morning. Men's Warehouse, this is Kevin speaking. I need to return a suit I bought last month. It doesn't fit. No problem, sir. Do you have your receipt? I do. Great. We offer a 60-day return policy, so you're well within the window. Can you bring it in today? I looked at the suit lying on my bed, pristine and unworn, a symbol of everything I'd almost compromised myself to become. I'll be there this afternoon. The return went smoothly. Kevin, the same young salesman who'd sold it to me, was polite but incurious about why I was bringing it back. $400 back in my account, money that could go toward groceries and electric bills and the small pleasures that made retirement bearable. Money that wouldn't be spent on lies anymore. I stopped at the grocery store on the way home, filling my cart with the simple things Dorothy and I had always enjoyed. Fresh bread from the bakery section, coffee that came in a can instead of a bag with exotic names, ingredients for the pot roast she used to make on Sundays, the one that filled the house with smells that said home in ways no expensive meal could match. The checkout girl was new, probably Emily's age, with bright pink hair and a smile that seemed genuine. Find everything okay? I did, thank you. That's a nice tie, she said, nodding at the thin black tie I was still wearing from the wedding. My grandfather used to wear one just like it. Used to? He passed last year. Cancer. But he wore a tie like that to church every Sunday for 60 years, right up until the end. I thought about her grandfather, about the generations of men who'd worn simple ties to important occasions, who'd understood that showing respect didn't require spending money you didn't have. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. He was a good man. Taught me that being fancy doesn't make you better, just different. I drove home thinking about her words, about wisdom that came from 19-year-old checkout girls and 72-year-old grandfathers who'd learned the same lesson from different directions. That evening, my phone rang. Jessica. Dad, I wanted to check on you. Make sure you got home, okay? I'm fine. The reception was beautiful. Emily asked about you. I waited, not sure I wanted to hear what Emily had asked. She was disappointed you didn't stay. She wanted to dance with you. Dance with me? In my old suit, in front of James's family, in front of all those sophisticated people who'd spent the evening trying to place me in their carefully ordered world. I'm sure she did fine without me. Dad, she's your granddaughter. She loves you. I know that. Then why are you being so stubborn? So what if she asked you to wear something different? It's her wedding day. Brides get to be particular about things. Particular, like James's mother was particular, like the whole family was particular about backgrounds and manufacturing jobs and grandfathers who didn't fit the image they wanted to project. Jessica, let me ask you something. When you got married, what did I wear? A pause. Your navy suit? And did you ask me to wear something else? That was different. How? It just was. Times were different then. People were less formal, or less ashamed of where they came from. Did Dorothy ever ask me to change who I was? No, but in 43 years of marriage, did she ever suggest I needed to be someone different to be worthy of her love? The silence stretched long enough that I could hear traffic in the background, the sounds of Jessica's Manhattan life humming around her. No, Dad, she didn't. Then maybe the problem isn't with me. After we hung up, I sat in Dorothy's chair and thought about the wedding, about Emily's face when she saw me in my old suit. Not anger, exactly, but something sadder. Resignation, maybe. The look of someone whose grandfather had failed to meet expectations she'd thought were reasonable. I walked to my desk and pulled out a sheet of paper, the same kind Dorothy used to use for her grocery lists, cream-colored with faint blue lines. I sat down and began to write, my handwriting shakier than it used to be, but still legible, still my own. "Dear Emily," I began, and then stopped. What could I say that wouldn't sound like an old man's lecture? How could I explain 43 years of marriage, 35 years of honest work, 7 decades of being exactly who I was? I started again. "My dear granddaughter, I want to tell you about the day I bought this suit. Your grandmother and I had been married for 6 months, and I'd just gotten promoted to line supervisor at Ford. Dorothy insisted I needed something special for the ceremony where they'd announce my new position. 'You earned this, Frank,' she said, 'and you're going to look the part.' We didn't have much money then. Your mother was on the way, though we didn't know it yet, and every dollar had a job to do. But Dorothy walked with me to J.C. Penney that Saturday morning, and we spent 2 hours finding the right suit, navy blue, because she said it brought out my eyes. Single-breasted, because double-breasted was for show-offs, and we weren't show-offs. $89. We ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner that week to pay for it. But when I put it on for that ceremony, standing in front of 300 men who'd worked beside me for years, I felt like I could take on the world, not because the suit was expensive or fashionable, but because it was chosen with love by someone who believed I deserved good things. I wore it to marry your grandmother. I wore it when you were baptized. I wore it to your mother's graduation, to job interviews, to retirement parties for men who'd become more than co-workers. They'd become family. I wore it to your grandmother's funeral because she would have wanted me to look my best on the day I said goodbye to her. This suit holds 43 years of our family's story. Not the parts we're ashamed of, but the parts that made us who we are. The struggles and the celebrations, the ordinary Sundays and the extraordinary moments when love showed up wearing its work clothes and stayed for a lifetime. When you asked me not to wear it to your wedding, you weren't asking me to change clothes. You were asking me to pretend that story never happened, to walk into that beautiful cathedral as someone else's grandfather, someone whose history wouldn't embarrass you in front of people whose approval you've decided you need more than mine. I understand why you did it. James's world is different from ours, and you want to fit in. You want his family to see you as worthy of their son, and you're afraid that my old suit might suggest you're not good enough. But here's what your grandmother taught me, sweetheart. If you have to pretend to be someone else to earn someone's love, then what you're earning isn't love at all. I hope James loves all of you, the Emily who grew up in Cleveland, who helped her grandmother make cookies, who knows what it means to work for what you have. I hope he loves the parts of you that came from people who wore the same suit for 43 years because it was made with love and cared for with respect. If he doesn't, then he's not worthy of you, and no amount of new suits will change that. I love you, Emily. I always will. But I can't pretend to be someone else to prove it. Love, Grandpa Frank. I sealed the letter in an envelope and wrote her address in Manhattan, the apartment she shared with James while they looked for something bigger in Westchester. Something worthy of the Whitmore name, no doubt. 3 days later, I mailed it. And then I waited to see if my granddaughter would choose love over approval, family over image, truth over performance. The roses were blooming beautifully outside Dorothy's window, just like they had every spring for 28 years, faithful and beautiful and true to their nature, never needing to change to be worthy of love. My phone rang at 7 the next morning. Emily. Grandpa. Her voice sounded different, smaller somehow, less certain than the confident young woman who'd called about wedding plans and new suits. Hello, sweetheart. I got your letter. Did you read it? 3 times. A pause. Grandpa, I'm sorry. About the note. About the suit. I didn't mean to hurt you. You meant exactly what you said, Emily. You were worried about how I'd look to James's family, about what they'd think of you if they knew too much about where you came from. That's not fair, isn't it? I could hear her breathing across the distance between Cleveland and New York, between the world I'd built with Dorothy and the one she was building with James. His mother did ask about you, about your job, about where you live. She has very strong opinions about appropriate matches for her son. Appropriate matches. As if love could be measured by bank accounts and zip codes and whether your grandfather's suit came from J.C. Penney or somewhere with a name she'd recognize. And what did you tell her? I told her you were wonderful, that you helped raise me after Dad left, that you taught me to ride a bike and read me stories and came to every school play and soccer game. Her voice broke slightly, but then she started asking about your house, your neighborhood, what kind of car you drive, and I felt so small. So you asked me to wear a different suit. I was scared, Grandpa, scared that if they didn't approve of my family, they might not approve of me. James's world is so different from ours. His parents' house has 14 rooms. 14. Sometimes I walk through it and feel like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life. There it was, the truth we'd been dancing around for months. Emily wasn't really ashamed of me. She was ashamed of herself, of the part of herself that came from Cleveland and Ford factories and grandfathers who'd worked with their hands. Emily, let me tell you something your grandmother told me once. She said that if you have to pretend to be someone else to earn someone's love, then what you're earning isn't love at all. But I do love James, and he loves me. I believe that. But does he love the Emily who grew up visiting her grandfather in Cleveland? The one who used to help her grandmother make Christmas cookies in our kitchen? Or does he love the Emily who's edited out the parts of her story that don't fit his family's expectations? The silence stretched long. I could hear traffic in the background, the sounds of Manhattan morning rushing past her window. I don't know any more, she whispered. Then maybe that's something you need to figure out before you go any further down this road. James defended me, you know, when his mother made that comment about appropriate matches. He told her that he didn't care what my family did for work, that he loved me for who I am. But then later, when we were alone, he said maybe it would be better if we didn't talk too much about my background at family gatherings. For my own comfort, he said. For her own comfort. The same lie Jessica had told herself when she dropped Kowalski from her professional name. The same lie I'd almost told myself when I bought that expensive suit. What did you say to that? Nothing. I just nodded and smiled and pretended it made sense. But, Grandpa, it felt like dying a little bit inside. I closed my eyes and saw Dorothy at our kitchen table, young and pregnant with Jessica, crying because her own mother had suggested she might want to improve me before bringing me around her. Church friends. Your grandmother faced the same choice once, I said. Her mother thought I wasn't good enough for her, suggested she could find someone with better prospects, better family connections. You know what Dorothy told her? What? She said, Mama, I'm not looking for someone to impress your friends. I'm looking for someone to build a life with. And Frank builds beautiful things. Emily was crying now, soft sniffles that took me back to when she was 7 and had scraped her knee learning to ride that bike. I miss her so much, Grandpa. I miss feeling proud of where I came from instead of apologizing for it. You don't have to apologize for anything, sweetheart. Not your family, not your history, not the man who loved your grandmother enough to wear the same suit for 43 years because it reminded him of the best day of his life. Will you forgive me for making you feel like you weren't good enough? I looked around my quiet house, at Dorothy's chair and her coffee mug and the roses blooming outside the window she'd planted with her own hands. At the life we'd built together without apology, without pretense, without ever asking each other to be anything other than exactly who we were. There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart. You're trying to build a life with someone you love. That's what people do. Just remember, the strongest foundations are built on truth, not performance. Can I come visit you? Soon. I want James to meet you, the real you, in your house, in your world. I want him to understand why that suit means so much to you. You're always welcome here, Emily, both of you, but come because you want to, not because you feel guilty. I want to. And Grandpa, when I come, will you wear the suit? I want to take a picture of us together in it. I want to remember why it's beautiful. After we hung up, I sat in Dorothy's chair and felt something I hadn't felt since her funeral 15 years ago. I felt hopeful, not for myself. I'd learned to be content with my quiet life and my simple pleasures. But for Emily, for the possibility that she might choose love over approval, authenticity over acceptance. The roses were in full bloom now, deep red against the morning sky. Dorothy would have loved them. She would have loved knowing that our granddaughter was finding her way back to the values we'd tried to teach her, back to the understanding that being worthy of love had nothing to do with the price of your clothes or the size of your house. Some things, I thought, watching a cardinal land on Dorothy's rosebush, were worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth wearing the same suit for 43 years to protect. Love was one of those things. Real love. The kind that didn't come with conditions or requirements or notes asking you to be someone else. The kind Dorothy and I had shared, and the kind Emily deserved to find.